Okay, welcome to another Coffee with Samso. Today I've got Rob Longley here from Ardiden Limited. A different story from Canada, Ontario. I know a lot of people don't hear a lot about that part of the world, but it is well-endowed region. Rob, maybe just give us a good intro about yourself and the story, and we can hear what you got to say.
Sure, Noel. Thanks for coming in and giving me the time to talk to shareholders and people that want to listen and perhaps learn a little bit more about Canada and Ardiden and what we're doing and what we plan to do. That's generally what people want to hear, and it's hard to often get that out into words. So I think your avenues that you do are a good opportunity to do that. Ardiden is really just quite a simple gold story. What's a little bit different is that we are in Canada. We're not sitting in Canada today, obviously. We're sitting in the Perth sort of shared office. But we're actively drilling for gold at the moment in Canada as winter sort of closes in. I've been with the company since May 2019, so no longer getting my feet under the table or getting comfortable. It's like really starting to ramp up activities. It's taken a good year to set the portfolio the right way and to pivot from lithium, which is where Ardiden was, into the gold space, and build up a gold project which really has that opportunity to make several big discoveries in that is interesting to investors, right? Not just a postage stamp or a one-season campaign. It's a long journey that's in front of us. And we're encouraged by what's happened over the last 6 months or so with the share price and market cap and attention on the stock. Slowly people are understanding why companies like us, as well as the producers, are out in these far-flung places exploring for gold.
Yeah, I think well, it's not an issue, but one of the stories that comes out of Canada or that part of the Northern Craton is that they are always giant sort of deposits. They're actually and they're multi-million ounces and things like that. And Pickle Lake is effectively in a region of the land of the giants. You might want to use that word, but the exploration upside is where I'm most interested in it, because it's always go where the big boys are, and you have good geology, as many people have said, good geology is always the surprises on the upside.
Yeah.
So just maybe share with us the optimism or your thoughts of the exploration upside of Pickle Lake.
Yeah, well, I think it's as a geologist, if I put that hat on for a while, it's immense and really exciting to have 100k strike length from one end to the other of Archean greenstone, with 4 existing or underground gold mines having produced 3 million ounces out of it at high grade. So that part just in Pickle Lake tells me that you're in the right place to explore. What we've managed to do is build a continuous package around that to give us, we just expanded from 666 to 800 odd square kilometres through some strategic acquisition of freely available land to give us a real exploration portfolio of multiple prospects and deposits. Some things which are known to have gold in, and some which we think are the right structures and the right host areas to hold, similar to what you have in, say, Red Lake, out to the west, and Musselwhite up to the north, and elsewhere in Ontario. Mm-hmm. There's sort of that 2-tier of types of deposits in Ontario as there are in Western Australia, where you've got high-grade lode systems, but you've also got large open pit, sort of 1 gram, 2 gram dirt. What we're looking for are the deep, from surface, from fresh rock, down to 2 kilometres there at Red Lake at the moment, still mining. And Pickle Lake was developed to over 1 kilometre deep. So we're just scratching the surface at one deposit, while we're economically aggregating, a big package that gives us a long-term opportunity to add value as we get into the next prospects and deposits, get multiple rigs going at different stations, and all that takes a little bit of setup and time, but that's what excites us, right? Because you're in a gold territory. It's very similar to geology to what we're brought up in the back garden here in Archean greenstones, so that part of it is reasonably straightforward. The challenge is getting out there through the seasons and different terrain and remoting in a different country, operating in a different country. But that's something that I've done for the last 20 years, in more difficult countries, by the way. So.
Yeah, I remember you've been in Africa and all this. Yeah, but what's the funny thing about, I guess one of the issues is with the investors that we have here in Australia is we're spoilt in terms of where we find our deposits, because we're always talking about 200 metres, that's very deep, or everything's, in the 80s, 90s was all the supergene stuff, and suddenly 90-metre cover was an issue, and then 20 years ago, 90 metres was not a problem. We're finding the mid-hundreds, and Kirkland Lake is, down in Fosterview is now looking at stuff much, much deeper. But a lot of people don't realise that in the rest of the world, especially in northern the Craton, a lot of these things are actually very deep and actually still mining. So therefore they make money, right?
Yeah, Musselwhite's a great example. It's been running for a long time and fully paid off. Its operating costs are very, very cheap, and it's producing at grade of sort of 6 or 7 grams. So an underground mine out there, that's established and all the infrastructure is in place, can operate. I mean, Hemlo operates at 4 or 5 grams. Big tonnage, big deposits, but they all started with exploration. Every major needs an exploration company to go and find it or to give the indication that you're onto something big. That's what we're doing. Your big companies aren't doing that so much anymore. It's not effective for them. So we're in that niche of being an active and nimble explorer with a massive sort of package to look into and chew our way into it as fast and as smart as possible. My experience tells me that you need to be very careful with that. From a safety point of view, you got different sort of challenges in Canada as you do in Africa, but they're not to be ignored. So we're not rushing in just blindly going out exploring everywhere quickly, dropping rigs in by helicopter everywhere. There's a lot of work to be done there with the First Nations and with social governance, with the actual mines department and everyone, especially in these times of COVID, to make sure that you're there next year, the year after, the year after. I mean, the market might play out differently, but that's our strategy, is to establish ourselves, learn from one deposit like Cass, move to the next one. So we're hoping to drill at South Limb, before Christmas, to do some test holes in there. Some really interesting results coming back from magnetics that we've just flown there, and start stepping into other places all the way across that sort of massive land package. But once you get off the main highway, there's a benefit that you can drive into town on a seaward highway, and we're still working out ways to get better synergies with our cost effectiveness on what do we need up on site, what can we do back in Thunder Bay, as opposed to how do we spread our feelers out into that territory in a meaningful way that doesn't upset watercourses, traditional landowners and the way we operate. It's a big area, right? People, these sort of maps that we have, and there's one there in front of you, the orange blob as we call it, going across there. It's often you want to put the scale bar there for people to say that is a massive area. Drop that into Western Australia and you never imagine getting a package together like that as a junior.
Well, that's one of the things that attracted me to Ardiden, and I've learned that over time looking at some of the packages that people have, and it's huge. And I guess from like what you mentioned also, you mentioned that the greenstones in where you guys are, and we had this conversation off camera before, is that when you look at that map, it's like any other map that you would see, except that for some reason people don't see that. They don't go, oh yeah, that's like what we're seeing in the Yugin, right?
Yeah.
And then but then it's the same geology. We're talking about the Yugin Craton, but not here, but in Ontario or Africa or whatever.
Well, there's a lot of synergies and a lot of Canadian or TSX and ASX listed companies cross-pollinating, and it was the same in Africa for a long time. Some similar types of geology and systems, Archean and Proterozoic deposits. This map, for example, the map of Canada that we have with the greenstone belts, what I often do with that one for local people is where it's just turn it north-south and sort of suddenly tell them this is very similar to the Norseman Walloona sort of system. And that helps sort of get the perspective of how much of Canada is covered by really prospective Archean systems. Alaska's a different story again, but Quebec and Ontario in particular are really well endowed with Archean gold systems as well as base metals and stuff. But so the opportunity to get in there and peg all this ground, own it, was just too good to miss out on in this space. What's helped? There's two things I guess which help us get into that is improved technology and a pretty strong gold price and a good outlook. So you can't do this without investors, shareholders, people interested in your story, people think they're going to get a return, and the gold price staying up, and all those things have sort of come together. How long they'll last, I don't know, but it's given us a good opportunity to get in and start doing some real proper exploration in this area, which hasn't been done before.
I think in of later months, I've sort of I mentioned that it's times like this where people need to have actually just to figure out who's actually got the substance, the projects and sense, and the management that can do it, and the potential upside upon discovery. And when I look at things like this, where you get a nice big package, you've got the right smoke, and it's just a case of meticulously going through the steps and having the right management to do this. And it's not a sprint; it's a marathon. And a lot of people forget, the very, very well used quote of a 20 years overnight success is what this really boils down to, because you strip, you got everywhere you go. As I said, you mentioned you've worked everywhere. In Africa, you got African issues. In Australia, you got Australian issues. New Zealand, and South America, and all that. But it's just, but the discovery is still there. So it means something works, right?
Yeah, exactly. And Russia has its own challenges as well, right? There's some good things about Canada, but you're right. There's a lot of distractions that less experienced leaders or teams can get either disheartened or distracted by, for want of a better term. The team that I'm putting together are pretty experienced, stable types of people that understand the ebb and flow of the market and the ups and downs of it, but underneath all that are really excited with what the opportunity is. But you need a core investment that are sticking with you for some time. So we've been really fortunate to get Bell Potters to support us and bring in institutions, so that you're not just in and out as the market changes from week to week and vaccine to vaccine and president to president. All those things happen, and they're out of our control. And I think what the core investors long term in Ardiden, similar to Gold Road across the road here, that's a perfect story that went from someone going in looking at what was an interesting looking gold area to, well, what about this other area? Why don't we look there and build up the story and work that right through to the point now when they're not only in production, but they're actually paying dividends. Yes, they've given away a fair bit to get to that stage, but that's an absolutely incredible model that Ian and Ziggy and the guys did, with all the support of the market along the way. So communicating with the market what your strategy is, ticking off the boxes and doing what you're saying is really what Neil, Pauline and I are trying to do. We're trying to set aspirational targets and try and reach them, but if we don't quite explain why not, and it could be COVID, it could be the season, it could be whatever, but set ourselves some pretty high standards to achieve, and deliver on that.
Touching on that, how is the market sentiment at the moment in terms of sectors? Everyone's hot on WA, and then there's Australia, and then there's the rest of the world now. I mean, look, eventually all these things will work itself out, as it does, looking back at history, right? We're not that great that this is just for our generation. I'm sure at the Great Depression time, everyone thought this was going to lead to the end of the world, but it hasn't. So what is the equity market talking to the likes of yourself?
Oh, geez, no, that's a big question. There's more experienced people than me that can give you a far more expert opinion on that. But what we notice, I guess, from this side of being in the junior end exploring for gold, is that it's volatile, and that to have that stable core of investment is really, really important. And there's lots of distractions around, in a good way as well as a negative way. I mean, a lot of people expect you to find the next Hemi and the next Gilumna and the next Tanko with the next 4 drill holes. And we get that, so the expectation runs high, and then when you release results, they're not that major discovery this time, so you drift back. That's the ebb and flow of the market, right? And you got to be able to live with that and support it and explain it. But it's great that people are making discoveries, and there's that investment into exploration. That is fantastic. That's what really encourages us to keep going aggressively forward, and march into these sort of areas which people want you to go and explore for gold. Find it. If you don't, if it's not there, so be it. But we think there's pretty good odds of finding something big in here. You look at those share price. If you talk about Bellevue, you go back to Drake or go back 8 years of Chalice share price. They've all had really tough times, but they probably had core investors that knew it was a good team, a good place, something will eventually be found. And that's kind of what you need. Great if you get some successes quickly, but that can set expectations very high, right? We're also in a good neighbourhood with other people exploring. So you're not out in the middle of nowhere going it alone. That's tough, but with other companies around you exploring as well, synergies will eventually come as those projects move along.
I think you're right. I mean, the fact that, you mentioned Hemi and all this, but, not long ago, De Grey was pounding the streets of West Perth and not getting too much joy and people. I mean, I wrote about the whole De Grey thing even prior to that, and I actually loved it, and I reckon that great shareholders stories, and I was still pondering why no one was supporting the stock. Hemi came along, and somehow everyone's just forgotten about the old hardship days,
Yeah.
And suddenly it's like, oh yeah, we can do this. But I think it's the support. I know so many companies that's done that. I mean, Hot Chili comes to mind. They went through such a dry period, and now looks like they're popping their head out, and that's just one of many stories. If you said, I remember Gold Road. They took up that area, and people were telling me, that area. People actually said that there was no gold there.
Yeah.
Different age group, and 10 million ounces later, and different thoughts again.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and a different shareholder base by then, right, as well. So you've got those different stages of investment appetite. But Gold Road is a good example where a lot of investors have stayed all the way through because they knew it was making those progressive steps, in a logical way.
Yeah.
And you don't always find that discovery or get enough, to do the feasibility study to get finance to go into a mine. But that to me is a fantastic story. It's and Ian talks a lot about a marathon, not a sprint as well.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to be taken from those experiences. And look, if you look into your Hemis and your Tankos and stuff, you can see those explosive increases, but they're reporting. You look at the JORC table, they don't yet quite understand the controls of mineralisation. I mean, Tanko was probably drilled down dip for some time, not intentionally, but because they're still working it out. They're still working out Hemi. As a porphyry, it's got a funny shape. What will all that mean? We're still getting into Cass. It's kind of a more systematic shear zone where we think we know the targets, but a lot of our other prospects have analogies at Musselwhite and analogies at Great Bear, Dixie. But until you get underneath the lake or underneath the swamp or into fresh rock and start doing orientated core and working diligently with the structure and putting it all together, you're still piecing it together, right? Because nobody's done this before in this area. They've come in and banged a few holes, done some flow-through shares on the TSX and moved it on.
Yeah, I mean, look...
I don't want to be disparaging about that. Everyone has their own financial models, and there are other really good Canadian examples doing great work, but Pickle Lake in particular has suffered from a little bit of a piecemeal approach.
I think I read somewhere that they're earmarked to do 100,000 metres of drilling on the exploration side, and they put a budget of 50 million or something like that across.
Is that Evolution?
Yeah. And so, I mean, look, it's one of those things, like I think when Northern Star took over something at Quindana or something, I remember one of the presentations, they said that I could see that they've drilled like Swiss cheese, but they found another 900,000 ounces somewhere in that gap. So, for viewers who are sort of new and grasping on this understanding, the fact that you're in good geology, and I think this holds more true than not true, is that the surprises tend to be on the upsides as not, because you've got all the ingredients, all the cooking ingredients there. And when I see something like a Pickle Lake where you've got definite mineralisation all through, where is the big mother lode? That's going to be the $1 million question for you, the likes of you guys.
Yeah.
And that's the same for everybody. I mean, who would have thought Hemi was where Hemi was? And they've had that project for a few years, So, look.
And it's right under their nose, right? But it takes a brave person to go and start challenging the theory, and that's what Ian Ziggy did at Gold Road. They challenged the theory of where the gold was. And I've had that experience as well in other projects where you come into a project and they're busy drilling deposit A. So you get started on that because it's there and you've got access and things are set up. But as you understand the geology and the mineralisation, whether it's iron ore or gold or diamonds, you say, well, what about that anomaly over there? Has anyone ever looked at that? Because that looks potentially bigger. And I think that's where we're at the moment. We're starting on Cass, but we're seeing all these pictures now through new geophysics, new analysis that says, well, that looks actually a lot more interesting. How quickly can we get there? And that's what the challenge is with the market and investment. Will they give you the time to spend the money and the time to get out there to the bigger targets while you're still drilling where you've got access and agreements with First Nations? And that's the same anywhere, right? The Pilbara's got its own permitting and regulations as well. There's nowhere anymore where listed companies should be operating as cowboys. So it takes a little bit of patience, but I think often the ore bodies are basically under your feet.
You know, as I get sort of older and think I'm getting wiser, I learned that everywhere you go, you're going to have a problem, and the problem arises because it's for you to fix, and I think that's why you things succeed or things don't succeed. But if you got all the ingredients there, then there's a reason for you to make it work in that sense.
Definitely.
Look, going forward for Ardiden, in terms of, you know, and I know when I ask this question, it's a bit of a crystal ball. What's the timeline? You know, what do you foresee in the next 12, 24 months? How are things going to move?
Yeah, no, the next 12 months is going to be really exciting, I think, for Ardiden. We've got our foundation now on the ground at Pickle Lake. We've got a drilling contractor. We're drilling. We know how to operate in the area. There's better ways that we're going to be able to drill our other prospects. We've got 2 First Nation agreements, and we're working on a 3rd one to get further into the Dorothy Dobie area, hopefully. But in the short term, it's continuing drilling at Cass, which we're doing now. There'll be a short break over Christmas and part of January, and then get back on Cass with more resource drilling. Get some drill rigs out to South Limb, which now looks really exciting from the drone mag that we just flew. Some really interesting stuff up close to the Donna Lake mine with iron formation, which is generally the host lithology there. And then get out to that sort of New Patricia, Dorothy Dobie area is really what our core investors want us to get out to as soon as possible. That's 30, 40k shear zone, very similar to Dixie, with Golden Patricia mine right in the middle of it, which is Barrick owned. So it's still the exploration story, right? It's nothing more complicated than that. But trying to do it in a smart way that you're not just blowing money on glory holes, getting the same old hits that people have got here and there. It's really trying to understand the controls on mineralisation, and they're all different. You know, you talked about it before, different styles of mineralisation. There's porphyries out there as well. Different types of felsics and mafics and some ultramafics. Putting all that together, which is what we're doing behind the scenes, both geophysically as well as sort of with smart geologists now on board, helping us. As you start to put together the history from 30, 40 different junior companies that have all got reports similar to WAMEX stuff in the system, going through those, digitising it, extract the numbers, you start to accumulate the wealth of knowledge that was there and interpret it in a new way. The other thing which I think is really sets us apart from the other explorers in the area, and we wish them all the best and hope they make discoveries, is that Ardiden own 85% of the ground we own outright, and we can manage it as we think is the best strategy. We don't have any payments to make on all that ground, we own it. Other people have certain timelines over the next 3, 4, 5 years that they have to fulfil, or they get zero. So we're in that lucky position of having the majority of our land holding to do as we see fit and as the market dictates your paces. So we think that's an advantage in the area. So that's another part of why we think the story here is going to be really, really good.
It's interesting, that people forget that in the Norseman lunar belt, in the gold fields, as we call them, it's just not gold out there. There's a lot of stuff out there. And it's no different. It's just an Archean greenstone belt, and that's it. And everything's cooking, one big hot cooking pot.
And when the gold price comes off, people go back to nickel. It's a rich system, as are the other side of Ontario is all the Timmins and those sort of Sudbury big deposits there that are established. It's a mining province, as is Western Australia, right? And it feeds the economy and it feeds investment.
That's right.
It's a good place to be.
Yeah. At this point in time, I guess, Rob, I'd like to give that 2-minute spiel, and sell your soul and why buy Ardiden. What would be the killer pitch?
The killer pitch is to attract investors that like gold exploration stories, right? It's nothing more complex than that at the moment. People that, our registry's changed a little bit since a recent placement, but a lot of our shareholders are stuck with us. When I joined, the day after I joined, we were at 0.2 cents, right? So in 18 months, we've gone from 0.2 cents to 2.4, 2.5. And that's an increase in market cap from 6 to 50 odd million. Yeah, we've been up briefly and back down again. So you sort of climb the mountain and have a look. That looks good, but you know what the value is, and we know we've got a lot more work to do to build that gold resource. That's ultimately what the value is, or to look for opportunities around that. There's opportunities in the region as well that we haven't yet sort of pursued heavily. But as you get a bigger market cap and more power and more ability and trust in the investment, that's there as well. Yeah. So we really think there's years of exploration growth here as we step through Cass to South Limb to Dorothy Dobie to West Pickle to it's numerous. It just keeps going, Tonsil, all the way through that sort of western hub and the southern hub, more into and maybe the big ones are in those greenfields that have never even been looked at. So once we start establishing our infrastructure out there, getting the cost of exploration down, getting more drill meters in the ground, which is ultimately what makes discoveries, that's where we think the real growth is over the next couple of years, making those discoveries, putting it together and seeing what happens in that region altogether. And we hope the gold price stays up. We hope a vaccine comes out and everyone's safe. And we plan to keep all our people safe. Ultimately, that's what it's about.
Yep. I mean, for viewers who's been interacting with myself, I love this story because it's an exploration story. It's got all the ingredients. It's got nice big packages, good management. Funding looks good at this point in time. Market shares good. Look, feel free to send us questions. I'm sure Rob will be waiting on the phone or email, quickly answering any questions you may have. Let's follow this journey. Thank you, Rob, for giving us time. I think it's a really nice story because you're probably the only one that's in Canada that I've talked to, and I think it's an awareness that a lot of people don't get in our ASX.
Yeah.
But thank you, Rob, and I hope to keep following the journey.
Thanks, Noel. Thanks to your followers too. Appreciate it.